Right. Morning, everyone. Put your video on. There we go. Morning, everyone. Thank you for your patience. I know we've had some issues with Zoom and logging in. It seems that they've got a whole lot of new features that we need to be aware of. So thank you for your patience. It looks like everyone is slowly but surely joining in. Most of the people seem to have joined in. So I'm going to hand over to Ronald to do the opening. Ronald.
Thank you, Jackie, and welcome to everybody. And thank you sincerely for joining us in the second FSA webinar of the year, with today's webinar specifically celebrating the International Day of the Forests, themed Forests and Innovation, New Solutions for a Better World. Our sector faces a number of challenges. These range from biotic and abiotic threats to our growing stock, sustainable utilization of our resources, to market access and international competitiveness. The only tool in our arsenal to address these risks are through continuous generation of a knowledge base to position us to make informed decisions on the best way forward. The industry is committed to R&D, and this is evident in its R&D expenditure, which is 1.62% of our gross domestic product. This is more than double the national average, sitting at 0.62. The industry's collective approach to R&D is also clear when you consider that FSA research expenditure is 47% of our FSA budget. When including the leveraged funding from government, the R&D spent through FSA is more than the total FSA budget per year. In today's webinar, we not only hope to communicate the excellent and cutting-edge research our research partners perform, but also hope to demonstrate the impact this has on the sustainability and the competitiveness of our sector. I invite everybody to enjoy today's event, but more importantly, please take the opportunity to engage with our researchers through the Q&A and the chat box. Once again, thank you sincerely for joining us for today's event, and I truly hope you enjoy it as much as I will. I will now hand over to Jackie to take us through some housekeeping information. Thanks, Jackie.
Thanks, Ronald. Welcome, everyone, again. See, people are still joining us, so glad to have you all on board. When you get a moment, once you've joined, if you can just pop into the chat and just introduce yourself so we know who all has joined us, and we appreciate you joining us. As Ronald had said in the Q&A, we'll keep that for questions. So if you can just note questions in the Q&A and then obviously just general chat in the chat box. We've got quite a full and busy program, as you have already seen. So I think from there, we'll jump straight into our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Jackie. It's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker is busy with international travels, and as we speak, is actually sitting at Business Harvard School, representing the South African municipality she works with. But today, our guest speaker for today is Miss Flic Blakeway, and most of us probably know her as Flic, and she likes to introduce herself as a farm girl from Kokstad. She has a passion for living systems, sustainable resource management. In addition, a deep passion for creating an enabling environment for small farmers or small landowners through technology transfer and continuous technology improvement. She worked for Mondi in South Africa for more than 20 years, where she managed the tree improvement and nursery program. She was a member of the East African Tree Biotechnology Technical Advisory Team from 1998 to 2011. She then subsequently joined the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, where she was a manager of the forestry and forest products, as well as a sustainability and environmental technology research teams. She retired from the CSIR in June 2020, after having been the operation and special manager in the Natural Resource and Environment Unit and in the Smart Places Cluster. Flic's relevant expertise in this domain of research management is research and technology interface for impact, and value addition and development forestry for socio-economic impact, which is really relevant for today's event. She's the author of 15 peer-reviewed journal articles, 29 presentations in international conferences, as well as 27 national conference presentations, and she has co-authored 2 books. Flic is currently serves on the National Forestry Advisory Council and has also previously been the vice chairperson of this council. As Flic could not be here today, she has pre-recorded her address, which we will show now. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues and friends. I'm sorry that I can't join you in person for this webinar this morning. When Ronald approached me about this address, I replied and said, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm actually going to be in New York City participating in a Bloomberg Harvard City Leaders Program, and I won't be able to do the address. So he responded very quickly, most rapid turnaround time on an email that I think I've seen in a long time, and said, well, wouldn't you just be able to record something? So folks, if you get really bored with the sound of my voice this morning, and if you hear the sound of New York Fire Department or New York Police Department sirens in the background, it's actually Ronald that you have to thank for that. And the other thing that he's got himself into is that if you've got any questions following this, Ronald's the one who's actually going to be answering them. When he approached me, he said something along the lines of presenting the value proposition of research to the sector and to funders, and why research is valuable and important to the sector, especially in addressing the challenges that it faces in order to secure sustainability and competitiveness. Now, it's an enormous privilege to be asked to do this, and really thank you, Ronald. In line with the FAO's theme of forests and innovation, it really is a privilege to share some thoughts with you on the value of research to the plantation forestry sector. Well, I am sad that I can't hear your passionate presentations this morning. I fondly recall these types of symposia being really, really highly energetic and very animated, as speakers expressed themselves very persuasively about the indescribable social and environmental and economic benefits that our plantation forestry sector offers. I think in going forward with this address, it's redundant for me to dwell on the fact that RD&I, research, development and innovation, is crucial to ensuring and to improving the international competitiveness of the South African forestry sector. I think that we all know that. And certainly those of you who are going to be speaking today will share the specifics of how your research is contributing to this. You will be sharing data, and you will, I think, probably be sharing a lot of facts and figures. So I'm not going to dwell a lot on that. I'm just going to share a little bit in terms of what I recall about research and what I anticipate to be future requirements. As we know, R&D and also innovation in the sector has for decades been focused on improving productivity and enhancing the sustainability of the sector. And in addition, those of us involved in R&D have been generating the knowledge required to also, very importantly, reduce the environmental footprint of the sector. To this end, I think it's realistic to acknowledge that very broad as well as deep research is required. And most of us gathered here today know that the targeted R&D framework approach of FSA has provided a very robust but also an agile platform to ensure that the R&D that is being carried out is both relevant and impactful. And I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that in South Africa, through FSA and the strategic focus areas in the R&D platform, investment in research is steered towards enhancing sector competitiveness and sustainability. And in particular, I think we can acknowledge the strategic R&D focus of forest protection, as well as the prioritization of environmental sustainability. Responsible forestry requires attention in sustainable and efficient and effective practices that have the lowest environmental impact and that yield the greatest social and economic development, while at the same time producing an array of renewable and versatile end products. To my knowledge, FSA represents 11 corporate forestry companies, I think in the order of around 1,100 commercial timber farmers, and some 20,000 small-scale growers. Collectively, this is in the order of around 93% of the total plantation area of around 1.2 million hectares. FSA supports the industry in both common and pre-competitive areas. I've already mentioned protection against pests and diseases, environmental issues, as well as, very importantly, education and training in legislation. And I think that in South Africa, we are very, very fortunate to have the capability and the infrastructure within the South African research platforms to carry out the RD&I of the very highest quality to enable decision makers in the sector to make their decisions confidently and with assurance. We've got so many. We've got the Tree Protection Cooperative Program in FABI. We've got the Forest Analytical Laboratory. We have the Market Technology Platform, the Disease Screening Platform. I think the ICFR has got the Information Center. We have an enormous number of platforms to be able to carry out world-class R&D. Now, I think we can all acknowledge that plantation forestry is certainly more than just the science of planting and managing and caring for timber plantations. It's about the very soul of what is among and between and around the trees. And it's the place where effective and efficient best practices with the lowest negative environmental and social impact should be made possible. And it doesn't matter where in the value chain you're doing your research, or along all the interconnected stages, each one adds value to the trees and the final products. If we look at seedling production, if we look at site preparation and planting, silviculture, forest management, harvesting, transport, primary processing, secondary processing, value-added processing, and even if we go into things like waste management and recycling in the circular economy, every step on the value chain is so critically important. And the value chain in plantation forestry is dynamic, and it's influenced by so many factors. We've got market demands, we've got environmental considerations, technological advancements. and sustainable practices with social responsibility and the efficient utilization of the resource are integral parts of the chain. And way back when I worked in Mondi, I was reminded of the value of turning the question of research funding around, not to ask, why do you need additional funding, but rather to ask, what will be the consequence if you don't invest in additional funding in plantation forestry R&D? So really, what would happen if there was no research in plantation forestry? What would happen if there was no data and knowledge generation because of lack of investment and because of lack of funding? I think we would quite easily land in a situation where we had very unsustainable practices. There's no doubt that we would have reduced productivity. South African plantation forestry research has for decades been focusing on enhancing the productivity of tree species and ensuring better growth rates and disease resistance. What would happen if this research stopped? What would happen if pests and diseases research stopped? Of course, we would then have an increased vulnerability to pests and diseases, and you're going to hear more about that later this morning. The genetic diversity will be reduced. We'll have increased environmental degradation, and the innovation that our sector can be so proud of will be limited. And when you have a decline in innovation, you then also have a loss in economic opportunities. And very, very importantly, with what I've mentioned to date, there would be significant reduced possibility of being able to address things like climate change challenges. So the R&D in plantation forestry is critical. Looking forward, what areas of R&D are important going into the future? Of course, important is improved tree genetics and sustainable forest management practices. But extremely important now is climate change adaptation and mitigation. There's never been a greater sense of urgency in R&D towards understanding the impact of climate change on plantations, and very important in developing strategies to adapt to these. Again, pests and disease management continues to be critically important, as does efficient research diversification. In closing, and adding to the sort of research focus areas that I think might be important going forward, what are the challenges facing the sector? I've mentioned climate change, but aligned with that, very critically, is water scarcity. South Africa faces water scarcity, and climate change poses enormous challenges. Precipitation patterns, increases in temperature, extreme weather events. These all impact the growth of trees and affect overall plantation health. We're going to be seeing a new suite of invasive species and pests. Things like the pine nematode. They pose a significant threat to plantation forests, and the damage that is caused and the reduction in yield is not something that is new or foreign to us. I think we must also be aware of the fact that there's also the issue of something that is perhaps more complex, and that is the conflict over land use. If we look at the conflict between forestry and agriculture, there are issues around social issues, including conflicts with communities over land rights. We continue to be a highly regulated industry, and policy and regulatory challenges are not going to go away. Neither are the global market dynamics, including the changes in demand for timber products. Fire risk, incredibly important, and precision forestry technologies being integrated into the sector, I think, are going to be extremely important going forward. I think a little bit outside of the traditional ambit, things like waste reduction and circular economy practices are going to be important. And then we could probably put it as climate smart forestry management, I think, is really useful to have in our foresighting. And it's going to be critical to include adaptive management strategies that take into account the impact of climate change on plantation ecosystems. The successful implementation of all of the innovations requires collaboration between researchers. Researchers must work together, but they must also continue to work with industry stakeholders, with policymakers and local communities. So if you're a manager or if you're an official from any one of our national departments who is wondering about whether or not to increase your R&D budget, I urge you to ask yourself, what is the consequence of not investing? Because our R&D and the innovation that goes with it is a crucial component for the growth and the success of not only the plantation forestry sector, but also of the national economy. So friends, as you deliberate on your research findings today, I encourage you to be compelling. I encourage you to be persuasive and entertaining. I encourage you to be exciting in the way you communicate your science. Our industry is so exciting and multifaceted, and we all delve into different corners of it. So as you share your science this morning, your data, your knowledge, I urge you to inspire your audience. Get the funders excited, get the managers excited, get the government officials excited about not only the current potential, but the future potential of the sector as well. And I urge you to always make your science exciting. Make sure that when you share your science, you don't leave anybody behind. Make sure that by the time you leave here today, it's going to be an absolute no-brainer that the people holding the purse strings in the private sector and in government are going to want to give more and more and more into research, development and innovation in the plantation forestry sector. The sector is vibrant. I guess it's a little bit like New York City, and it is never still. So I urge you to really push the boundaries of your research, and I urge you to share it with passion. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful morning.
Colleagues, I really want to thank Flic in her absence. I think her talk was not only thought-provoking, I think it also reminded us of the value we are contributing to our sector as a research community. But also just, quite thought-provoking on the way forward for all of us, and setting a challenge for all of us in expressing the value of our research and continue to contribute to the sustainability of the sector. For me, being in forest research for the past 24 years, it's been really an experience to see how agile our sector is in responding to challenges, and also how we're able to diversify our research base. And as Flic said, that's only due to the increased investment in R&D we've seen from our industry partners, and also the leverage funding from government. I also always like to use that figure where people sometimes ask you, how do you quantify the impact of research? For our sector, one of the nice quantitative figures we can use is over the past 40 years, we've seen an increase in plantation area of 8%. With that 8% growth, we've seen an increase in production of 53%. And that's purely due to the implementation of excellent research that's been done. And as Flic also clearly expressed, it's because we do this research collaboratively as a sector, but also because of the close partnership between our research partners and our industry partners. So once again, just a big thank you for Flic in our absence, for taking the time in a busy schedule in from New York to do the voiceover for us. So thank you very much.